without further ado, I'm going to welcome Richard Manus.
Excited to be here and, just hope I can be a little helpful, man.
So I want to start out a little bit on your background, because I think people always want to know, how do you get there? How do you get into the industry? And people have, they start all sorts of places. You are not from LA. You didn't go to one of these like USC or like one of the big film school with like this huge alumni network. Can you, share with the audience, how did you get here? Where did you come from? Kind of what's your writer's journey?
I'm from Detroit, Michigan originally. And, my kind of like journey to writing, I think like it's one of those deals where I guess if you were to look at it now that I'm kind of sort of here, it like maybe makes sense, but I definitely was not somebody that when, like if you knew me when I was growing up, you would have been like, that kid's gonna be a writer. You know what I mean? Like the only writing I really did was the writing that I did for school that was required of me for like work and whatnot. I kind of really was first exposed to screenwriting, both for like whether it's for television or for film, honestly, in college. I was in a group called Act on Racism, and we did kind of like social theater improv with like a real comedic bend, and we would hold like talkbacks with the audience. And the school had a student-run television station or whatever, like how a lot of schools have, and they had a pitch night, and I wasn't there, but some of the people pitched an idea for a show based on some of the sketches that we did. And the student run station, whatever, they liked that. And when it came time to write it, nobody really wanted to do it. And I kind of got volunteered for it. So that was my first time really getting exposed to like TV writing, and it was just something that I really kind of fell in love with right away. And one of my good friends, he was in the film program at the university we were at. And I went to him and was just like, I want all the film books. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know about any kind of stuff. I didn't even know that writing was a career. And I was like always just trying to like devour and find whatever scripts I could, because for me, honestly, the format and the form of screenwriting is liberating for me. Like writing like a novel seemed very intimidating, but there's something about the efficiency and the kind of like more streamlined, just the fun parts in theory of writing for film and television. The highlights, if you will, of the character's journey or the journey of the story that really appealed to me and made sense. That was kind of the beginning of it, and then I didn't know that like I wanted to write for sure. Then I was just kind of messing around with it for fun. I bumbled my way in and out of grad school after that for social justice and human rights, before I was like, I think I really want to try this writing thing, and then I went to Vancouver Film School.
When you were reading those books, does any stick out, or that was helpful at that time, or maybe you still reference or think about today?
I remember when I was talking about how once my friend was in the film program, I was like, give me all the books. Like one of those books is, of course, what I mentioned. Almost all of us have read, is the Sid Field screenplay book, and it's like turning point, blah, 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 or whatever. But like to see that was like, obviously, about like 5-act structure, 3-act structure from going to school, but to like be like, oh, we're on page 12 to 15, this is going to happen in most of your movies. And I was like, oh man, like this is crazy, I think it's a great book to read because it will help begin to give you understanding of structure, particularly for film. I think it's too rigid, like a lot of these books I think are too rigid, but there's definitely stuff you can learn there. A book that I love that I think is not only like just a great read as like a book, but also something that's informative for like how to survive like your journey in the industry and learn as a writer is Adventures in the Screen Trade by William Goldman. A couple other books. This book called, is this backwards to you guys? Or is this?
Oh, that's good. That's good.
It's good? Yeah. We good? All right. On Filmmaking by Alexander McKendrick is really awesome. It's more, he's a director primarily, he's a writer too, but it's just a good book on storytelling.
I'm gonna rec one because this is a very thin book. It's it's under 100 pages. Look how thin it is. Writing the Pilot is just like a very simple, great book.
I've never heard of that one. I'm gonna check that one out.
William Rabson, Writing the Pilot. Yeah.
A TV book that I like. It's a little old school and it skews a little bit more traditional sitcom. Is the TV Writer's Workbook by Ellen Sandler. I love books by people who done the thing. There's a lot of books by people who, in my opinion, haven't really done the thing, which doesn't mean that you can't learn from them. You can, but I'm always like, let me get the extra grains of salt. You know what I'm saying? But it's just a really good example. It talks a lot about how a writer's room works and walks you through how they would kind of break an episode on that show. You almost feel like you're in the room with them to some extent a little bit.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think people love it.
Can I read a couple more books real fast? So this is John Truby, The Anatomy of Story. What I love about this is the way it kind of breaks down different kinds of films and it talks about the intersection of story and character in some really interesting ways that I've never seen in a book different than this. I like this book a lot. 2 books by Spike Lee that I love because he's so fearless and also one of my favorite filmmakers. By Any Means Necessary, which is kind of him chronicling making Malcolm X, and also Spike Lee's Gotta Have It, which I could not find my copy of, which is about him making She's Gotta Have It. And this is super dorky, but this is one of the books that I got when I went to my friend and was like, yo, give me the books. This is called The Screenwriter's Bible, and basically what it is just a formatting guide for all kinds of things. And I still find it to be really handy. I literally used it like 2 days ago.
What else are you doing to improve as a writer so that when you get that chance, when one of those writers says, I want to read your script or something, that you feel that the script is strong enough to do something for you?
You have to be writing all the time, in my opinion. I remember when I was a PA on Rules, however you feel about whatever the show Rules of Engagement was, I remember talking to and seeing some of the writers that worked on that. And for the way I felt was like, it felt like being around like equivalent of like NBA basketball players. You know what I mean? Like they are in the pros. And seeing that all of them had something they were developing or trying to develop or a script they were working on, I'm like, y'all writing more than I am and you doing the thing that I want to do. You know? And so that's one thing. I think you gotta always be working on something. You gotta finish a thing. So many people don't finish. They get halfway through and they abandon it. You can't do nothing with a halfway finished project. But the other thing I would say, in addition to just be writing, I think people should have specs and I think they should have originals, which I know you said we want to talk about a little bit at some point. But I think one thing that was vital to me was the writers group. You know, which we were in a writers group together. You know,
that's how we met.
That's how we met. Y'all were crucial, you know, to my development as a writer, to be able to have 3 and then eventually 4 other people who were smart and thoughtful and talented, giving me feedback on my script on basically a weekly or a couple times a month basis, you know, was huge. And then also just knowing that I got to show up on Saturday or Sunday or whatever it is. I got to have something because Mike is going to have something, you know, or Lisa going to have something. You know, it just helped really push and pull me forward, I think.
As you're developing, are you becoming a funnier writer as well, or are you just becoming a better writer and your kind of natural comedy can shine through more? Like, can you become a funnier writer? Is that actually a skill that can be developed?
I think what you become more proficient at, I think to some extent, no, maybe only because like, I think at a certain point, like certain people see things a certain way and that just allows them to channel funny. You know what I mean? But like that, in my opinion, will only take you so far because if you're working on somebody else's show, if you can't funnel that into the characters of the show, it's kind of useless, honestly. You know, like I've been on shows where I pitch things and people laugh and the show was like, that's funny. They're like, that's not this character, or the actor's not going to say it the way you just said it, so it won't work. You know what I mean? So you have to know how to distill it into the voice of the showrunner / the voice of the characters on the show. I remember one of my early scripts I gave to a writer that was on Rules, and he read it and it was fine to him. But what he told me was that the jokes were not sharp enough. He's like, you have some funny concepts in some of these words that you put together, but they're not quite jokes yet. They're not sharp enough.
What's a funny concept versus a sharp joke or something that's going to hit?
I'm gonna be real with you, dude. It took me 3 years to understand what I'm talking about. Like, but to answer your question, kind of, it's like drilling down and like finding like, what's the sharpest way to say it? What's the slightly different way of saying it that we haven't heard before? You know what I mean? What's the way of saying this thing that doesn't take us off of story? How can you still be on story with this joke that you're doing, you know, but still be funny about it, as opposed to trying to say something funny that had nothing to do with the scene that we're in right now? You know, what's the way that I would say it versus the way I'm writing for Tim Allen and Nancy Travis and all them that Mike Baxter, the character, would say it? You know, like those are the things that helps you sharpen it, you know? And some of it, this is a frustrating answer, I feel, you begin to pick it up from being around it.
I feel like there's also a thing where, you know, comedy is, in my mind, a lot about like tension and release, right? Where you need the trigger to actually laugh. And I feel like a lot of times in comedy writing, what you're doing is looking for that, where you have like a comedic situation, like someone can be like bumbling around and being funny, and you're kind of like, all right, yeah, that's funny, but you need that line or that surprise or something that is going to make someone laugh. But sometimes the biggest laughs are when you know what's coming, right? Like you've seen the pattern and like something's happened and you're just looking at that other character and you know what they're going to say, and they say it, and like it just gives you permission, to laugh. What is kind of at the core of being able to just write, even though there's all these problems? Like, is it your voice? Is it just the ability to tell a story?
The thing that I always try to keep in mind is just like earn the page turn. Like, I'm just like, do you want to turn the page? We were talking about our friends on the executive and the producer side a little bit. Like, they get so many scripts. There's so many scripts. There's so many people trying to do this, and so I'm just always like, am I earning the page turn? Are they having a good time with it? You know what I mean? Are you engaging them? I think that's what I'm trying to do on the page. And I think if that's what people are coming away from it, at least a little bit, that's when I know, like, okay, like there's something here.
There's a really interesting question here is, how do you weigh jokes versus story in a comedy script? Because I feel like, if you put too many jokes in a scene, it sort of becomes about nothing. If you don't have enough jokes, then it's not funny. So how do you balance the jokes and the story?
I think, generally speaking, though, unless it's like really, really hilarious, you gotta always be surfacing that story, because especially we'll find even when we're in production, those jokes that are funny on the set or with the audience or whatever it is, they wind up getting cut, because they don't service the story, So I think that's the marriage you really want to be looking for is, how can we tell this joke in a way that's on story? You shouldn't hopefully have to be taking too many detours to try to get jokes in, and I think that's a lot of the ways to have that, though. It comes back to the structure of the story, the structure of the scene, because each individual scene should be almost its own little story in and of itself. I worked with a guy one time. He would talk about what's the game of the scene. And I forget who it was that told him that. I think he learned that from somebody on 30 Rock, I want to say. And it's a really interesting
improv concept.
Is that an improv thing as well? Yeah, like what is the game of the scene? Which is really just a comedic way of saying what's the conflict of the scene, in my opinion. But identifying that will oftentimes, I think, help you begin to find what the moment needs to be about, and then you can dramatize that in a more funny way or a more serious way, I guess.
You mentioned that a scene has a structure and the episode itself or the script or the movie has a structure. How do you develop those kind of structures in a comedy?
I think, again, it's going to go back to character. For me, it's always all about the flaw of the character. What is wrong with them? What is the thing that's holding them back from what they think they want or they think they need, even if it may not be what they actually need, so over the course of the movie, I mean, like the goal of, in my opinion, the goal of the movie or the purpose of the movie should be to like test this character's flaw over and over and over again. I think for a comedy, some flaws can lead themselves to, humor a little bit easier than others. I think character construction is going to help you there, in my opinion. Like if you're doing a comedy, you probably don't want to make your central character a really quiet person who's reserved, in my opinion. Like it could be done. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. I'm sure somebody could be like, here's 5 movies where it worked. You know what I mean? But if you think about something like a Bridesmaids or something like that, which is like one of my favorite comedies in like semi-recent memory, like Kirsten Wiig's character, her flaw was very clear in front of central, you know what I mean? And then you had the Rose Byrne character testing that flaw more or less the entire movie, and that's what's going to drive a lot of your comedy.
There's a question here, which I think is kind of relevant to that. What's the main difference between writing for a TV show and writing for a film, besides the length and story progression? And the reason that I'm bringing this here into the discussion at this point is I feel like one of the main differences is characters, right? And like how if you're writing on a sitcom, the characters are not going to change very much. It's kind of repeating the same situation over and over, but like in a film, Kristen Wiig's character is different at the end of the movie than she is at the beginning of the movie.
Again, so much of this varies on the show. You know what I mean? Like, I think nowadays, particularly with some of your single camera shows, there's a room for a little bit more growth, slow, but like you still say slowly over time. Like when I was working on Cronus, you know what I mean? We tried to evolve Zoe a little bit over time so that by the end of season 2 or season 3, she's still going to be self-involved, but she's a little less self-involved, or she's a little bit more aware that she needs to like fight against those tendencies. So I think it depends. Are you doing this 8-10 episode thing? Are you trying to do something that ultimately is going to be more of a 22 episode thing? I think if you're doing a pilot, I think you definitely don't want to have your character like make a huge pivot in the course of these like 30-ish pages. You want to like maybe have them be at the cusp of the beginning of a new thing that we're going into, launching into a new world that's going to be the show.
Which is better, writing by yourself or writing with the team?
I think they both can be fun. I think what's great about working with a partner is that it's very difficult to have, any version of writer's block or not have an idea. It's always awesome to like be able to throw something to somebody and be like, hey, I'm thinking this, how you feel about that or whatever. And a lot of times you can save yourself a ton of time from going down the wrong rabbit hole. You save yourself hours of work because I was able to talk to Mike and be like, hey, what do you think about X?
Have you also felt in that situation? Because I find sometimes when I'm talking to someone, it's not just that like if I'm giving you an idea or I'm asking you about something, it's like one, you may give me an idea back, but 2, I find that even just talking about it,
you figure it out.
I'm suddenly, it's like I asked you the question and I'm like, oh, I got the answer. I just needed to ask someone else in order to like get it going.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that's challenging about writing with a team though, like this is different in my opinion than writing on a television show with other people. In my opinion, is that like if you're truly in a partnership with somebody, it's basically like a marriage. It really kind of is. It's a creative marriage. And that can be challenging. Because you guys got to ultimately be able to agree on whatever you're doing, whether that's an idea in the specific moment, in the specific script, in this scene, or what is the next project you're going to write. I know people that the writing teams wound up going their separate ways because they got tired of like every time I want to do something, I had to get this guy or this gal on board. And I got tired of having to do that all the time. A writing group is the perfect way to have both. You know what I mean? You working on your own, but you hopefully got some talented, smart people in your circle of friends that you can share ideas with, that you can bounce ideas with, etc.
In your experience with writing rooms, were they more collaborative, as in everyone is working on each script of the season, or more siloed, where each writer's writing their own episode?
I've seen it done all the ways, I feel like, pretty much. I've been on shows where we do what we call Frankenstein it, which is like we break the story as a room, and then they dole out scenes to everybody. We go away for a day, maybe
on
2.
One
we
script,
write
right? On one episode.
One script. One episode. Everybody goes to write a scene. We cobble it back together with what's called a Frankenstein draft. It's normally way too long. And then the showrunner, we either do a cut pass themselves and then we continue to refine it, or they'll lead us through the whole thing. We just dive right in. I've been on shows where we did that. And then number 2, he would give you your outlines. What everybody got their scenes, and they would put on there, you have 2.5 pages to do this scene, so that the script would be super long. I've seen that. What I've done most of probably though is essentially the room breaks the story, a script is assigned to you, you are essentially the person in charge of running point on that story. You'll go off, you write the story docs, you write the outlines. Those don't are turned back into the showrunner in the room. Revisions are made. They go to network in the studio. Revisions are made. At some point, you'll go off on script. You write your script. You come back, and that process goes through again. And then hopefully, when it's shot, you're on set. You're kind of helping run point on it being shot while you're on set.
We wanted to talk about spec scripts, which we didn't actually do. I think maybe we can just mention them too. One step, if you're like, I don't know where to start with it, which I think is good for people at different stages, especially the earlier stages of your writing career, is writing a spec script, which I mentioned. That was the first script I ever wrote. Was a spec script is a sample episode of an existing show. And it's great for a lot of reasons. One, it's an easier way to start because you're not creating the world of the characters. You already know them, especially if it's a show you love. And it's a way where you can like learn structure and learn formatting and learn all those things, because you just get a bunch of try to find scripts online and just kind of like come up with your own idea for an episode and mimic it. How do you introduce your characters when you're writing a script? My writing always feels so awkward when I describe a character for the first time. Do you have specific ways you go about that?
I try to capture the personality and the essence of the character as opposed to like what they like physically literally look like. What is the vibe, the aura almost, if you will, of the person, as opposed to like what they physically, unless it's like relevant, to the script. Then I think,
Reacher, if you've watched Reacher on Amazon, the whole point is this dude's like a giant of a human
built
being.
like a brick house.
And so, yeah, for him, maybe you'd say like he's built like a brick house. He's like, like a redwood, or like you'd say something that like, I think it's think back and be like, what is the essence of this character? What is their sort of defining thing? And it may be a physical thing, like they're huge, or they're the most beautiful human being in the world. Or it may be more, like you were saying, they look like they went to church. Or I recently wrote a description where I described a character as someone who looks like he always reads the warning label, and like that's his vibe. That's his essence.
And even somebody like that read the script, like even somebody like Richard, you might describe him as somebody like you gonna say he's like always the tallest guy in the room. And when he moves through the crowd, he doesn't move through the crowd moves around him, or something like that. Because again, you want to capture the essence as opposed to like, because again, it all goes back to like, to me, earning the page turn. We be interesting, be fun, it's entertaining. We're here to have a good time.
Yeah, I want to say thank you everyone to coming. I'm sorry we didn't get everyone, but we're going to keep doing these. We're going to have 2 next month. But Richard, I want to say thank you so much for joining. I want to thank the audience, everyone. People have like really stuck with us the whole way, and I think that's fantastic.
Just want to say thanks for having me. To the people out there on the internet and whatnot. Good luck in your screenwriting journey. I know it can be hard. I know it can be lonely, but have faith, man. You can do it. You just gotta stick with it. Be honest with yourself. Don't be afraid of critical feedback. But keep hope alive, man, because they need us. They need good writers, man. So yeah. Thank you again.